Regardless of whether you're a fan of fighting games or not, you have undoubtedly seen this character before. This character is probably the most famous succubus in the world. Her unique design, with wings coming out of her head as well as her back, has inspired cosplayers and artists all over the globe. But not everyone knows that she originally came from a fighting game series. When people think of fighting games, the first thing they think of is most likely Street Fighter, then maybe Tekken or Mortal Kombat. But Capcom has a lot of other great fighters that are not that well known outside of the fighting game scene. One of those is the vampire series of fighting games, known as Darkstalkers in the West. The original Darkstalkers, or just Vampire the Night Warriors, as it was known in Japan, was released in 1994. This was the same year as Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo was released, which is the Street Fighter game that most fans regard as the best version of Street Fighter 2. Capcom had already made a lot of quickie follow-ups to the original Street Fighter, which had been a huge success. Fighting games were really lucrative at the time, as they were popular both in arcades as well as on home consoles. Capcom could also reuse just about all assets to create quickie follow-ups that allowed them to fine-tune the games while also making more money. Instead of going directly to Street Fighter 3, however, Capcom tried their hands on a new franchise, this time with a horror theme. But instead of being realistic and scary, they opted for a more cartoony look, ending up with a game that not only looks amazing, but is also incredibly well animated. The game story doesn't cover your standard tournament like in Street Fighter or Tekken. Instead, it's about an alien called Pyron coming to Earth to devour it. To stop him, various monsters from around the world gather together to fight him. Why they end up fighting each other first though is something I haven't understood yet. But then again, the story isn't really the most important part of this game. What makes it stand out is the cast of characters. You really have the standard monster movie tropes, but they are instead taken in a new and unique direction. Instead of Dracula, you have Dimitri the vampire. Instead of Catwoman, you have Felicia. Frankenstein's monster is the inspiration for Victor. Sasquatch is a Yeti from Canada. Bishamon is a ghostly samurai wearing a suit of cursed armor that drives him into a frenzy. Anakaris is the reanimated mummy of a pharaoh. John Talbot is the British werewolf and karate master. Dikuo, or Olbath, is a merman who is the sole survivor of his race and probably inspired by the creature from the Black Lagoon. One of the funniest characters is Lord Raptor, or Sable as is known in Japan. He is an Australian rock musician revived as a zombie, an obvious homage to Eddie, the mascot of the heavy metal band Iron Maiden. Then you of course have Morrigan the succubus. The boss characters here are Huitzil, or the much easier to pronounce Phobos as he was known in Japan. He is part of a group of ancient robots unearthed by the Mayans. Then you have Pyron, an alien that looks like it's made out of fire. Even though the characters are based on monster movie tropes, they each have their own designer, leading them to each have a very unique look. These characters are so well animated that the game to this day is a joy to watch and play. This is a clear upgrade from Street Fighter 2, which looks and feels stiff in comparison. The game's design looks like it comes straight out of an anime, with each character being very easy to read just from the silhouette alone. It's clear that a lot of time went into animating all the characters and their weird and wacky attacks. I've yet to see another series with this amount of detail put into every character. They even spent a lot of time animating weird attacks like Dimitri's Midnight Bliss, where he turns each character into something he desires before draining their blood. This means that each male character is turned into a female, but the females are instead turned into other versions of themselves, or whatever this is. A lot of attention has clearly been put into the stages as well. Given that the characters have their horror tropes, the art team could really go to town here as well. The stages are really a lot more colorful and bright than they could have been, given the source material. The first game was a success in arcades and is still fun to play today, although it feels a bit slower and more sluggish than later titles in the series. Given the success of the first game, Capcom decided to work on a sequel called Night Warriors: Darkstalkers Revenge. This game was released in arcades in 1995. In Japan, the game is known as Vampire Hunter. While this game introduced a few new characters, it was still mostly the same with similar backgrounds. It even has the same endings as the original. What it brings to the table are new characters like Donovan, a Dampier vampire hunter, hence the name of the game, and Xianko or Lele, a Jiangshi or Chinese hopping vampire. Lele reminds me of a female undead version of Moose from Ranma 1/2 because she hides all sorts of ridiculously large weapons in her clothing and puts them to good use as well. Definitely one of the more unique characters in this series. The bosses from the last game are playable as well. The game also introduces chain combos and the ability to store special gauges so that they can be preserved until they are needed. ES and EX special moves are also introduced. After the release of Vampire Hunter in the arcades, the series entered a bit of a slump as no home port of the original was released until 1996. Vampire Hunter also arrived on console in 96, but this time only on the Sega Saturn. This was a problem as 3D games were all the rage at the time. This was also the year that Tekken 2 was released on the PlayStation. Regardless of the move to 3D for a lot of other series, including Capcom's experiments with 3D fighters with Street Fighter EX and later the excellent Rival Schools, the next entry in the Darkstalkers franchise remained 2D. A big reason being the amount of work that went into creating the sprites. Creating 3D models for all these moves would be a nightmare, especially at the time. Even though 2D fighters weren't as popular as before, Darkstalkers 3 or Vampire Savior turned out to be one of the greatest fighting games of all time. The cast is amazing, the animation is great, it's easy to pick up but also deep, and it plays really fast. The new characters introduced this time are Baby Bonnyhood, or Buletta, a crazy version of Red Riding Hood with an Uzi, grenades, and other weaponry. QB is a humanoid bee-like creature, and fan favorite Lilith is a succubus formed from a part of Morrigan's soul. This time, the final boss is Jeddah, a nobleman in the demon world of Makai. Due to memory constraints, some characters from Vampire Hunter were removed, including Donovan, Phobos, and Pyron. While Vampire Savior has new stages, the main changes you will notice coming from Vampire Hunter is how the gameplay has improved. The game is much faster now, which makes it a lot more fun, while also making the animations look even better. The backgrounds and endings are also all new. Battles also take place within a single round, but each character has 2 health bars instead. This means that if one health bar is depleted, the character will be knocked down, before getting up again with a full health bar. Once both health bars are depleted, you will lose the match. Vampire Savior actually got a sequel in Vampire Savior 2, which is really just Vampire Savior with a new color palette, some different sounds, and the characters from Vampire Hunter. There are also some gameplay changes that just makes Vampire Savior a better game. A version of Vampire Hunter with the characters from Vampire Savior was also released at the time as Vampire Hunter 2, but the original Vampire Hunter is still preferred by fans here as well. These games have been re-released several times, most notably in Vampire Resurrection in 2013, which allowed you to play the game officially online for the first time. They also appeared on the excellent Capcom fighting game collection from 2022, which also, of course, offers online play and remains the best legal way to play the game currently. This whole series is really a set of hidden gems that are still fun to play today. It's not without reason that these games, and especially Vampire Savior, have gathered a cult following over the years. Now, if only Capcom could release a real sequel, that would be great. If you liked the video, give it a like, subscribe for more, and to watch more videos related to Darkstalkers, check out this playlist. If you would like to support the channel, you can also buy me a coffee by clicking the link below.